what are the key skills people need to progress in their banding. And it's not necessarily just about technological skills, but it's about the soft skills that we mustn't forget about. Go with what drives you, go with what you're interested in, go with what you've got a particular passion for. Because actually, the word passion, what you're passionate about, you will start to impact others as well.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Skilled Personnel Network, a podcast devoted exclusively to the development of radiography careers. My name is Fody Kyriakos. I'm delighted to be back, and we're joined once again by the co-host Boz.
Morning, afternoon, wherever you are. I'm Boz, exactly. I'm a reporting radiographer working up in the Northwest.
Fantastic. And this is the first time I'm saying this, and my producers made me do this, by the way. And when he told me the reasons for it, I realized I must do this. So please, if you're watching this, like it, subscribe to it, to the YouTube channel, and wherever possible, do try to push it for the sake of growing awareness for radiographers and radiography careers. So thank you very much in advance for that. I am absolutely delighted to welcome Edward Proctor. I think it's the first time I'm calling you Edward since the first time I've spoken to you, Ed. Ed, thank you. Welcome to the Crossroads Series podcast, mate. And tell us a bit about you.
Yeah, thank you, Fody. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. So, my background is in clinical education. I'm a radiographer, obviously by background, and qualified rather a long time ago now, 1997. I shouldn't say that, but I have. In terms of radiography, what brought me into it was a friend of the family. Actually, I hadn't even heard about radiography when I was 18 in the first instance, doing A-levels. And she said to the family, what do you think? Do you think Ed would enjoy that? And they said, yeah, I think so. What is it? So I went along to the local hospital and had a bit of a look round, and the rest is history, I suppose.
Fantastic. Well, do you know, you speak about 1997 being that crunch time where you chose your career path. Where did you study, Ed, and what was it like back then going through that process?
So I studied at the University of Bradford, and it was different then. I think at the time the actual School of Radiography was based in the old infirmary back then, and it wasn't until the second year that we got a brand new building. So the first year we were sort of it was a very atmospheric building, shall we say, with a huge library where we used to sit and for some of us used to sit and study, and some of us used to be going out partying on a Monday night. But and it was I was a bit of both. And it was a big, I remember a big wood panelled room with lots of books, and it was an interesting place. It was a quiet place to sit and do some work in, actually. And we had our particular hospital that we had to do our work at, and mine was at Halifax. So I was all West Yorkshire back then. You can probably tell by the accent that I'm not from Lincolnshire, where I'm based at the moment. It wasn't the first thing I did, actually. It brought me in terms of radiography. Before that, like I say before, I'd not actually heard of radiography. I was actually in engineering. I was a mechanical engineer.
Wow.
So yeah. And that was mainly because I fell into that a little bit. Offered a job at the time in a local engineering firm doing design drafting, doing design technical drawing. Went to college to study mechanical engineering, and actually most of my old friends actually are still in that field. One of which he's doing a design has a design consulting business, looking at different engineering. No idea exactly what he does, but I'm sure he'll tell me if he watches this.
So many of the viewers are probably thinking that you're certainly not old enough to have been a mature student at 97, but in 1997, should I say? But
at 97, you would be.
Yeah, this. I mean, obviously, he was an apprentice mechanical engineer, and but uh, what was that segue then that you made? I mean, interestingly, so you made your crossroads into radiography through another profession. So you just decided at that stage, Ed, it wasn't. You felt something else was calling you.
Well, it's interesting. I think we all occasionally have these huge changes in direction in our careers, whether that be a completely new career or whether that be just a change of direction in the career that we're currently in. When I initially did my studies at school, didn't exactly get the grades I wanted the first time round. Fell into engineering. Actually, really enjoyed it, but then it came to the point when I suddenly thought, hang on, what about radiography? I haven't thought about that. And is there a route in now? And there was a route in because I got a qualification in mechanical engineering. And that was deemed at the time, because I was a little bit further down the line in age and I suppose work experience. At the time, you could get into radiography through a side door. And that side door was a diploma in mechanical engineering.
So mechanical engineering to healthcare in general is quite a sidestep. You mentioned how you came to radiography, but why were you even thinking of healthcare in general from?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. As I say, I think it comes from the back of finding out about radiography when I was 18, enjoying it, but not at the time having the grades to get into it at that moment. Interestingly enough, one of the questions and one of the big hurdles you had to jump through at the time was questions surrounding use of wet developer. And because I was asthmatic and had conditions relative to asthma, there were lots of questions asked about, can you go in a dark room and do wet developing? So, which obviously is not a thing now.
Yeah.
So that was one of the hurdles I had to jump through at the time. But in terms of the other hurdles, that was crossed by the fact that I had this engineering qualification.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's always for me fascinating to hear these different routes, and particularly mature students that, even though you may be still early on in your mechanical engineering career, Ed, that you kind of chose radiography as your path. And from that sort of point, what was your thought process when you started? Because obviously now, in 2025, there are routes straight into modality. There's routes straight into the specialist areas of radiography. 10, 15 years plus ago, there wasn't. And so it's interesting to understand, because I've always known you from your MRI expertise, so to speak. So it'd be interesting to see how that became a path that you took.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right, Fody. I think back in the day when I qualified, you didn't have the routes in to do the cross-sectional imaging, the CT, the MRI. And what I did was I went into what we used to describe at the time as plain film. We don't really discuss plain film anymore, really. But it was very much seen as you cut your teeth on that, and I, my first main first full-time job, should I say, was at Queen's Medical in Nottingham. And very lucky to have worked there, actually, for a good number of years. In A&E, busy A&E, one of the busiest in Europe. Big orthopedic centre, lots of the opportunity to get experience in huge number of different imaging methods, techniques, views, if you like, of X-rays. Working in a hugely busy department, doing a lot of on-call, doing a lot of theatre work, and you don't forget that. I think early in your career that is a really good gives you a really firm understanding of everything that is going on in radiography, and also understanding a lot of the conditions that we see. And you don't forget it, like I say.
Yeah. No,
But yeah, I mean, MRI, CT came later for me. Yeah, definitely. CT first, and then MRI. And a lot of people actually at the time would do sort of 3 or 4 years in what I describe as plain film, and then they'd move on into CT. And then if we were lucky enough, you do MRI. Whereas now CT and MRI are seen broadly at the same level. Certainly back then, MRI was seen as the beacon, if you like. And, if you got into MRI in its early days, you were incredibly lucky.
Was that sorry, go on. Sorry, Karen.
It's just funny how you mentioned that transition, because the year I entered university was the last year they even taught anything about plain film, wet film.
Yeah.
So everyone, and even back then there was that step. It was plain film, CT, MR, and it's interesting to see how that has kind of even keeled. Now it's plain film, and then there's cross sectional, which is MR and CT.
Yeah,
and they are. But I think that's just down to accessibility, really, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, of course it is. I mean, times change, and it's good that we've got so much access now with, for example, the CDCs and patient access to these imaging methods that 20 years ago it just wasn't. It wasn't even feasible to even think that would be a thing. So I think it is good, but it has changed the way the stepping stone in the profession works a little bit, and I think it's one of the reasons why the look at preceptorships is so important now, because what we've almost done is we've gone, okay, people are going into CT and MRI quickly because the demand for those skills is there to fill these posts. But we've also got to look at, okay, well, that's all very well and good, but there has to be a structured approach to that, to getting to that point.
Yeah.
And almost taking a step back and going, okay, what are the key skills people need to progress in their banding? And it's not necessarily just about technological skills, but it's about the soft skills that we mustn't forget about. It's very easy to think, okay, everything's technology based in radiography, but well-being and leadership and motivation, and having the ability to motivate others, plus to be able to look after yourself in terms of your well-being, affects other people around you and your patients. Soft skills are incredibly important, and I think it's good. We're looking at that, and we are drilling down into that a bit more.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, because by and large, band 5 is plain film, and then when you start going to cross section, it's band 6, sometimes band 5, depending on the crossover.
Yeah.
And when you interview for a band 6 post, there are different questions. It's not just can you do this job, but people think of banding in just wage form, and it's not. In my head, as you climb those bands, you're a leader now. You're a team leader, or you're taking on those things, and those soft skills that you mentioned are definitely not yet considered enough in that preceptorship or the first 2 years of your career.
Yeah, I think so, and I think this was noted by the HCPC when they the proficiency standards were amended. I think the last time was September 2023, and leadership has become a huge area within that, because it's recognised that if you are going to become and take on senior roles relatively quickly, because the demand is there to progress, because of the throughput in terms of technology like MRI and CT, there has to be the support to do that, because some people are, without doubt, natural born leaders. There's no question about that. But not everybody is, and I think that we can harness the skills that people have and support them to become good leaders and good mentors, and then I think that's great. And as I say, that was recognised back then, that it was important to actually make it official, if you like. This is something that radiographers should be aiming for. And when they have their HCPC reevaluation, it's something they need to be able to show.
Yep.
Here's one of the things, guys. So, Ed, Boz and I have interviewed quite a few people now as part of the podcast, and we've seen a really amazing eclectic mix of people and reasons why they got into the profession. One particular interview sort of stands out for me in terms of the different ways, and this is with John Hoth, and when we're talking about him being very much tuned in with the technical and IT aspects of radiography, but yet still having to ensure that what he never did was drop his patient communication, even though he accepted that it wasn't as good as other people, other colleagues. So he might be much better on the IT and the physics aspect of it. And because we were looking at this, and I think this raises that point again, Ed, because since I've been managing the Skilled Personnel Network and the podcast, a lot of conversations around development has been around what some people call soft skills, as we've mentioned today. Other people call it non-technical skills. What I've also heard recently called essential skills for radiographers. So yeah, no, I'm keen to explore that conversation with you both, actually. And Ed, maybe I can put to you that, as you went through your career and you've raised it now, do you think some of this played into why you went into education?
Yes, I think so. And I think that having the ability to bring out the best in an individual, in terms of mentoring an individual, I think very early on I was very, very interested in that. And being able to see somebody progress and build and improve as a radiographer over a period of time is an incredibly nice thing to see, actually. And I think that's one of the reasons why I went into education, because I actually started by doing lunchtime tutor sessions. And what I would say, if people are interested in getting into education, is just put your foot forward, because people don't necessarily. It's not necessarily the first thing that people think of when they think of a career progression, actually. But I think that it is something that, if you are interested in, it's making people aware that you are. Just because people don't think about it, it's not something that people necessarily think they're suited for education. They're going to be a lecturer. They're going to do this. But like I say, what I did lunchtime sessions because I was interested in it, and I was interested in bringing something to the department to see the students build in terms of their confidence is always a great thing, and also existing team members as well. And from there, actually, somebody said something to one of the local university tutors and said, "Oh, Ed's doing this." And they came to see me and said, "Would you like to do some lecturing at the university?" I said, "Yes, okay then." And actually going back, it's quite interesting, because it was the first time I lectured, we were all using acetates and overhead projectors. So that was my first one that I did. So I turned up at this university with a cardboard box full of about 50 acetates, thinking, are they in order? Whereas we don't have to worry about that now. We all use PowerPoint or something similar, don't we?
Incredible.
But in even writing on the acetates, I had when I was at university, and they were using acetates quite commonly. They used to stand there and write on them at the time they were doing the actual presentation. One of the benefits of acetates and overhead projectors, should I say? But we don't use them anymore, do we? Not really.
No.
So that's how. To going back to what I was saying, that's how the interest in the soft skills and the ability to apply the interest in soft skills came about, I think.
What would be really interesting to understand from both of you is how important you see communication as a skill for radiographers, because I think you spend a lot of time with patients at a very vulnerable stage in their patient journey. And I'm just be interested to understand, how much resource you guys see is available, what's external, what's made available to you internally as well.
Yeah, I certainly think the skills in terms of communication, soft skills, ability to understand oneself, and is becoming more to the forefront of people's minds now. And I think departments do have, through coaching sessions and access to that support, it's certainly more commonplace now. And I think it's particularly important for patients who are maybe going through a very tough time. Maybe they've had treatment, maybe they've had bad diagnoses, and I think that's particularly important. In terms of other resources, for example, the Society and College of Radiographers, as you know, Fody, are running with ourselves a webinar on well-being in radiography, and I think it's incredibly important that I think individuals understand what makes them tick, understand what the triggers are, and understand that they are going to go to work with anxieties, but it's how you manage that, and accept that that is a normal part of life, that we are going to go through those days where we are really struggling, but it's going to know who to ask for help and how to deal with it internally that's important.
Yeah.
Pick up on a couple of things with that question. I think, as Ed mentioned, there are much more resources coming out and available at the moment. However, I find that those are post-university. University is can you do the projections? Do you know the anatomy? Do you know the physiology? Can you research? Can you do things like that? But are they taught how to communicate? I'm not so sure that every university will have a communication session as such pointed at, and it comes they kind of hope and expect that comes from the clinical placement. The year when I qualified, 2012, so I was 2009 intake, the bursary was still available, the NHS bursary, and my cohort was approximately a 50-50 split of school leavers and mature students coming from other professions. And the experience, so as Ed mentioned earlier, some skills are natural born leaders, natural born communicators, and you will have many school leavers who come into a hospital setting and are just brilliant with patients. However, you'll also have, I pick on the school leavers more just because the more experience you have in different areas of life, you've come across those communication situations. You may have, whereas a lot of school leavers are lucky that they haven't had to have hard conversations with really upset or injured patients, family members. And though they're lucky that they haven't had to go through that, it's almost that they now need to learn that. And it does come easier to some than others. I'm gobby. I'm really good at chatting to people. I love chatting to. I'm that person on the plane. If you're sat next to me, I'll probably start talking to you. But there are those who are shy, or don't know how to initiate those conversations, or haven't been through hardship to empathise, things like that. So I do think that early on in universities, they need to be able to start broaching these subjects and putting their students in mock situations where they have to think outside the box. How would you feel in that situation? And then when you qualify, it's normally external sources. It's not, you don't go to a leadership course or a communication course as part of your onboarding. It's you'll have to then go and see what your hospital or wherever you work, what those external courses are, and then ask to go on them. And if you don't know you need them or want them or what they can do for you, I think it just needs to be signposted so much better.
Yes,
because
I would agree with that. I think the other thing is, before you can lead others, and I say lead in a very loose sense there, because what I really mean is sort of either motivate others or be that person, go-to person, if you like. You need to understand what makes yourself tick. You need to understand yourself, and there's been a lot of work in sort of psychology, looking at this and understanding what different people types there are, and understanding what your triggers are and what level you're at in terms of mood, for example. So that's particularly important. How you turn up to work matters. It has a direct influence on other people around you and also your patients. And the other thing to remember is that it's not just your direct interaction with the patient. It's your direct interaction with others within the service that then impacts the patients on that day. So it's a two-part thing, really. If the local environment isn't working, for example, within the team, it's highly likely that the patient's experience is going to be reduced in quality.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing both of you guys from the with your clinical backgrounds as you speak about this. I mean, obviously, as you know, I've come into radiography from a workforce background, but I still feel and share these sentiments about how important. Well, I mean, communication is very, very important in relations and recruitment, so to speak. But it's incredibly equally as important for radiography. And I remember, Boz, about your story about the patient you had, that actually you spent as much time or more time talking about his war story, and and that you became fascinated by that. And I think, I mean, I did a visit to one of my customers, clients very recently, and I just happened to be walking through the aisle and caught the eye of a patient that was sitting in her bed waiting to be seen in the X-ray department. She smiled, I smiled. There's nothing in it, I promise. But I actually stopped and we had about a 5-minute chat. And afterwards, she said to me, "Thank you. Thank you for stopping and listening." Because the first thing I said to her is, "Hi, how are you doing?" She went, "I'm not very well." And I went, "Okay, no worries. Tell me what's going on." And in the end, I could feel just having that conversation with her, that 5-minute conversation made a massive difference to her whole experience there. And how we teach that, I mean, because it's not saying you've got to be friendlier, but it's about, I know, I think it's Stuart Mackay up at University of Liverpool did some work on emotional intelligence. And so on. But it's things like that we probably could get into the training development, as you say, Boz, in undergraduate. And if it's done some places, fantastic. If it's not done consistently, maybe it is something that we need to push much harder.
I think what Ed mentioned before, if you go on any leadership course, the first session will 100% be nothing about leadership and all about you as an attendee, who you are, what you are.
Yeah.
And I think so that conversation, that interaction you had, I've had many over the years, and sometimes you just get a feeling that you should speak to that person or say something extra to a person. I've had someone I was X-raying posts. They had just had a pacemaker put in. Did the X-ray, and there was I just got a thing, and I was like, "Are you okay?" And she broke down and spoke about all sorts of things that had led up to her needing this pacemaker put in. And I think I was sat next to her bed for probably 10, 15 minutes, just letting her talk at me. And I went away from that, and not only did I feel good that I'd made her feel better because she thanked me afterwards for spending that time, but it made me think of what was it that made me ask that extra question. It's not part of my job, and I think that's it's the awareness, and those type of skills are experience based. I think being able to have a conversation is very much experience based, but it's teaching the thought process to have those thoughts that maybe an extra interaction is good, or maybe you can add something to your skills just by doing X, Y, Z, thinking about how you're feeling, thinking about how you're projecting yourself.
I also think that it's about, even if you're rushing, and let's face it, departments these days are incredibly busy, and we are more time pressure than anything.
Yeah.
However, I think it's a real skill to make a patient feel that you're spending the time to listen to them.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to equate to putting a huge delay on everybody else, but I think it's about changing the space that the patient's in. And I know that sounds a little bit odd, but you can almost make the patient feel that you're devoting all your time to that patient. The patient is your main focus and only focus at that moment in time.
Yeah.
And you're not actually doing it with your mind halfway into something else. It's a real skill, is that. You often hear people say, I was talking to the individual and I was the only person in the room. There's everything else going on around, but they made you feel like you were the only person at that moment in time. And that is how you should make a patient feel.
100%.
And that doesn't need an extra 10, 15 minutes in an examination. It just, it's making that experience for that patient optimal.
Yeah. It's simple things like patients sitting in the waiting room reading a book.
Yeah.
And as you're walking them to the room, you kind of go, oh, what's your book about?
Exactly.
You're doing that walk anyway.
Yes, exactly. Exactly
and
right.
So that, yes, and that is, it's hard to teach, but it's I think the teaching bit is the awareness that you have that ability.
Yeah.
That, students, they're thinking about 300 different things in their checklist, and obviously as you're more experienced, you've done the checklist. But it's being aware that say to the patient, start talking to the patient, oh, I'm a student, I'm just starting to do this, and you're having a conversation with them. You can still be doing your checklist while making it personal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. My wife interestingly talks about this with hair. She's the men's hairdresser by background, and obviously at that very moment, the person having their hair cut not only wants to have a haircut, but wants to have an experience. Isn't it? It's the analogy, almost the dynamics or the parallels there are quite similar. So I think this one definitely, guys, is one for us to follow up and talk about as part of the growth of the Skilled Personnel Network. And Ed, let me ask you this. So the podcast series is called Crossroads. I'm really interested to hear how your crossroads went from the clinical to the education, and how Imaging Innovative was born.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think certainly we all have crossroads in our careers, and I think one of mine was the fact that I started to work for a company that does, a large national company that does mobile imaging in MRI and CT. At the time, and this was probably around 2008, I think, something like that. And based on the fact that previously I'd done a bit of lecturing and I'd done a bit of few workshop sessions over lunchtimes, things like that. And I was at work one day, and I was thinking, I really would like to get involved with some education with this business. Actually, there's a lot of people who I'm working with who are very knowledgeable, and there was a couple in particular who I was in awe of actually at the time. I thought, crikey, their knowledge is insane, and their ability with patients is insane. And I remember thinking back to a comment that a previous tutor had said to me. They'd actually made a comment, and this was during when I did my postgraduate in CT, actually, at this particular university. And I'd submitted this portfolio, and there was a statement that the tutor made after that made me think, crikey, that's that statement when you think that's what I need to do now. And I remember at this new company thinking, you know what? These people have obviously been through some really, really good training. They trained me really, really well. They're superb teachers. This is what I want to do. And from that moment on, working for this company, tying that into what this tutor at this university had said to me about 5 years previously, I suddenly thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. And I remember putting some feelers out and speaking to the head, I think she was of clinical governance at the time. And this role came up and they approached me and they said, Ed, have you thought about doing some lecturing for us? And I said, okay. And I remember going for this interview. This interview was more like a 2-day sort of bit of work, bit of going out for a meal, bit of having a drink with a couple of people. And I didn't realise it until after the event. And they said to me, "You did realise that was your actual interview, didn't you? It wasn't the actual interview you had in head office. It was the bit where you did the lecturing, and then you had your meal out, and then you had a drink with us. That was your interview." And I just thought, wow, and to me, that was the moment at which I thought, I'm really enjoying this side of it, and I'm enjoying the education side of it, and I'm enjoying the delivering of lectures. And actually, from that moment on, I feel that was the sort of a crossroads in my career. In terms of Imaging Innovated, interestingly, I'd done previously quite a lot of work in assisting referrers, sending patients into imaging, and working with taking radiology out of the radiology sector into other healthcare professions and expanding the knowledge of other healthcare professionals in how to use imaging. And actually, interestingly enough, I happened to be sitting in the office one day, and this was before Imaging Innovated was formed. And I had an email from actually a physicist who was, at the time, part of the old Impact CT group that were, I believe they were a government sort of led organisation that would give advice on procurement for CT scanners. I don't know if it was government led, but it was certainly something to do with that. It ran alongside it, and they would advise various individuals on what equipment to purchase and what have you. And he said, such and such a person is lecturing on or giving an interview on radio about the 40 years of CT. And I thought, I'll have a listen to that. And I actually managed to get the contact details for this lady and say to her, I'd like you to come and do a presentation on this particular course on 40 years of CT at the time. And this lady was the lady that I ended up running the business with. That's how we started Imaging Innovated, because we both had a shared interest in taking radiology out of radiology in terms of education and supporting other healthcare professions in their use of imaging. And that's really where the business started. And then we expanded it into work for radiographers, work for other groups as well. We now obviously do the leadership training, Fody, that you're aware of. We do radiation protection. And we work with we have a great team, actually, of about 10 people that we work with in various different clinical settings and various different skill sets.
Which the way you say that, you reached out to someone who you heard on the radio.
Yes.
And that created a business. You've now this is something Body and I have kind of touched on pretty much on every single podcast. Is just reach out. The radiographers, especially academic, clinical, doesn't matter what. Reach out. If they are obviously their specialty and their area of expertise is obviously because they like it. So if you're passionate about anything, and they see that, they will help you, or they will talk to you. They will point you in the right direction, which brings us to the network, the skilled personnel network, and bringing all different types of radiographers from every different background, from every different walk of life, from every different specialty, into one place, and opening that. Social media has helped that the barriers have become smaller, but still, I think you think, oh, that person is a clinical academic working for the government and the HCPC and stuff. They won't want to talk to me about my interest in X, Y, Z. But really, we all do.
Okay, exactly. And what I always say to people as they progress through the careers is, what are you interested in? What are you passionate about? And don't be scared of being openly passionate about a subject. That's particularly important. And if you can drive your career off the back of a passion, then do it. I think that, if you can go to work and really enjoy your job, it helps massively, because we spend an awful lot of time at work. And I think actually then, by being openly passionate about a subject, you tend to find out who is also passionate as well. And that's one of the reasons Imaging Innovated started. And we're very lucky that we are now in a position to meet a lot of people at conferences such as UKIO, through online, through LinkedIn, through skilled personnel, who share that same mindset. And it's only when you get people talking and working together who have the same mindset that actually what you end up with, the sum is greater than the individual parts, actually. So I would say to everybody who is maybe thinking, where am I going to go in my career, is ask yourself, okay, what drives you? What interests you? What are you passionate about? And share it. And don't mind, it doesn't matter that you are being open about that. And get to chat with people on social media about it as well, and join groups, interest groups. I think that's particularly important if you can.
100%. I mean, I'd agree with all of what you said, particularly a bit about the skilled personnel network. But
no bias.
No. Jokes aside, actually, on the platform, one of the members, a gentleman called Kleanthes Konstantinidis, I should be able to say that because it's Greek. I didn't. I'm relegated to a phony Greek. But basically, he put a very, very interesting piece of research together last year around radiography workforce globally. And what's interesting for me about this is actually the whole of the profession definitely suffers from an identity crisis. I mean, if Boz, you or Ed go outside of your working environment, you're in the shops or wherever you might be, and you bump into a radiographer, I'm sure you guys and probably most of you go, oh, I'm a radiographer. It's much less than it's much more of that than it may be for other AHP families. It may, for medicine, any other profession. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, perversely, I get very, very excited when I meet radiographers outside of my professional space, because it's a profession that does require greater awareness. And the fact that it's a global challenge says to me that even though radiographers in the UK have done incredible pioneers over the years to take role extension and scope of practice to where it is now, far, far further than anywhere else in the world, but still, we still have as I say, an identity crisis that is globally something that we need to think about.
Yeah, I think so. But and it's worth remembering actually with radiography that we have to realise, I think, that there's very few professions that has the scope to move into so many different fields. If you think about it, I know people who've gone into research. I know that people who become business managers. I know that people who lead operations directors, education, and some of them don't do any clinical work. They stop the clinical work. Some of them run things like that alongside. So, for example, I still do clinical work. For education, that's particularly important that I'm up to date with everything. There's so many different fields, and I think the nature of the profession now is that flexibility can happen. Actually, the workforce has become more flexible and has to be more flexible in terms of provision of imaging services for patients, whether it be NHS or private. So if you've got a desire to do, for example, education alongside clinical, then make people aware of that, because that flexibility is there. I think it's just pushing the boundaries of that.
You know, Boz, and Ed, one of the things that I think about very, very, discussions that I've had recently is creating a route for radiographers to have that opportunity. So I know a number of radiographers, Ed, that have looked to get into education in various different ways. And, you know, there's room for so many, there's room for so much more than what we've got at the moment. And obviously the stuff that you do with Imaging Innovated is incredible. And the Leaders Within course, by the way, is just, you know, is amazing. But interestingly, often the biggest challenge is having the time and the access and the route to do it. It's not easy. And you know, I think about Boz. You lecture still at Salford, is that right?
Well, I have in the past. I haven't since COVID, but I still use still kind of when the students turn up at my clinical hospital, I still go through a few different PowerPoints and tutorials that I have with them.
And I think,
yeah,
I mean,
I think in terms of
sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I think in terms of you mentioned COVID, it's a really interesting one, that because in terms of education, we had to adapt to the new normal, if you like, that was described at the time, and it's interesting because we are a very technological focused profession, and we've got to harness that. Obviously, not forgetting all the soft skills side of things as well. We've got to harness that and you know, go with the new technology. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff happening now that makes things easier in terms of accessing and flexibility in terms of things like online learning. It doesn't have to be just something that you watch that's a recording. It can be interactive. You can do a little bit of stuff online. You can do a little bit of stuff in classroom. Even in terms of scanning, we're looking now at remote scanning, aren't we now, in the certain technologies that are available. So what I would say is that not only in education, but in all aspects of the profession, is harness the new technology, and try and make a niche for what you want to do, if you can.
Good advice.
Because as times move on, that flexibility, I think, will increase. It has to increase as the demand grows.
Definitely. I mean, that's great advice. I mean, finding your niche, Ed, and definitely something for radiographers to think about. You know, whatever that niche looks like, it could be clinical, it could be non-clinical, it could be a particular pathway. And I suppose, Ed, with that in mind, then, what advice would you give to radiographers either starting out in their career, reaching different crossroads in their career? I mean, you've given us some nuggets already, but anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I think the key thing really is as I've said, is focusing on what drives you every day, and be in the moment as well. Now that sounds quite deep, but when you're at work, just be in the moment. That's particularly important because we can get too easily taken on this conveyor belt or this sort of roller coaster of being rushing around on a daily basis and not really stopping for a moment to look at what we need to do. Often we say to people, if they are wanting to build a future, is take time to plan, make sure that you're not constantly firefighting in your career. Take a step back every now and again and just sit down and have a moment and think about how you're going to plan things out a little bit. And that's what I mean by being in the moment sometimes. And as I say, go with what drives you, go with what you're interested in, go with what you've got a particular passion for. Because actually, the word passion, what you're passionate about, you will start to impact others as well. You'll start to feed off each other a little bit more if that comes out. That sounds quite deep, that, Fody, but I think be true to yourself. Follow what you want to do and follow what you're interested in.
100%. Thanks, Ed. And a question that how do people find you? Tell us how people can find out more about you and Imaging Innovated.
Yeah, of course. So we are online, website, www.imaginginnovated.co.uk. Hope you don't mind the marketing. All of our course material is available on there. We focus on live, interactive courses, which are very much smaller groups, if you like. We very rarely have more than about 20 people on an event because we lose the interactivity after that. So the main focus is those smaller groups. We also do a variety of different work with various different hospitals that people come to us and ask for tailored solutions to training issues, and we work with them on those. So yeah, that's the website. That's where you can find us, and I'm contactable on LinkedIn should anyone be interested in that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Boz, thank you as always as well. And
thanks, Fody.
Much a pleasure, Ed.
To like and subscribe.
Yeah. Click. For those, interestingly, this is going to get recorded, and so by the time people see this, they will hopefully have all sat down and watched the Wellbeing in Radiography event. But if they haven't, and we're plugging it on this particular podcast. It's available to be watched back and recorded. So thank you very, very much, Boz and Ed, and have a great day, everyone, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Fody. Thanks, Boz.
See you next time.